Well, one for me, and there's a few that come in mind, but the one that really gets at me is that if you look at the statistics of Nigerians, specifically Yoruba people all over the world, a lot of them are in high positioned places, and that's because of from a young age, just from our culture, we are taught that even we come from a long line of ancestors, and every single one of those ancestors have done something in the world, and it is our duty in life to do something in the world. So when Nigerians are scouted a lot to go on scholarships to Canada or America or Paris or Spain to go and do work, to go and be doctors, to go and be engineers, to go and be something. And when I was younger, I absolutely loved that idea. I was so excited to come to Canada and, put my place, put my word into it. But then it got to the point where the meaning of that mythology of Nigerians being hardworking, Nigerians being able to do so many different things, spread themselves out to so many different worlds, became that we are capitalized. We are put in positions of power, but not really power, so that it can be used for either diversity, so that it can be used that, hey, we have this hard-working person. It became a modern-day slavery, pretty much, of us going into places and they would come to Nigeria, pick up the hard-working, high-class students, take them away from their family, away from their support group, to go and work in like an engineering firm in America. And when they say that, hey, you're not really treating us well in this place, and my visa is about to expire, and I can't complain that you're not treating me well, they'll be like, nope, we'll just deport you. And they'll deport them back to Nigeria and be like, let's pick another hardworking Nigerian, and then pick them again. And it's on and on and on like this, to the point that it's heartbreaking. First of all, for the young kids in Nigeria who grew up with this thing that, ooh, the white man is gonna come pick you up from your desolate third world country and take you to the promised land. You're gonna work and work and work in that promised land, and maybe you have enough money to bring your family to that promised land. And it's that sort of mythology that I still have to, talking about unbiased assumptions, I have to also unmask, is that where am I putting my values towards? What am I running towards? Am I trying to pursue my art? Am I trying to pursue my career because I believe it's something good for me? Or it's because of I have this innate pressure to make Nigerians, to make black people seen as people, people that are smart, not people that are smart for a reason, not a reason that will benefit others, but we are smart for ourselves. And one thing that has really been a point across when we look at this mythology, now that it's becoming more open in Nigeria, is a lot of people are refusing to leave Nigeria and using their talents in Nigeria. Instead of being engineers in America, they stay in Nigeria and they work on the landfills that are flowing up. They build more equipment to help with water distributions for villages. People are staying in Nigeria and using their talent to build up the land that they grew up in, instead of taking this mythology of you are a hard-working person that is going to come to the promised land, and so that's one of the biggest one that I can think of. But yeah, there's no, it's still an ongoing thing, but that's one of the ways that we're trying to compact it in our way.
Thanks for sharing that piece. And as a Chinese person, as of Asian heritage, I can really empathize with that, because we too, in our history, has been subject to slavery, being sold. That's deep in our history. And I think our shared cultural drive that we have to make something of the world that we come into. And what's amazing is that when I hear your story of the myths and misunderstanding, there's so much commonality. Like we're called as Asians, where I was brought up, our cultural heritage is also, you have to work hard. You have to be hardworking and to make something of yourself and to prove something. And that can really get easily taken advantage of. So I thank you for sharing that. And in a way, I guess you're helping me to heal as well, because nowadays, I still struggle with that. I have tendencies to neglect my family and choose work. It's sort of been role modeled by my father as well. But I'm coming to terms. I actually really struggle with this question because and I don't really fully know what all the cultural mythicism and misconception people have about Asian people. And so I guess one of the things that being an educator, what I often have to fight and battle with as an Asian is in the education research literature, often Asians get portrayed as Confucians style learners who are about memorizing, they respect the higher authority, and it's depicted in such a way that it's negative. And they're just compliant. They're compliant good students that memorize things and they won't question you. And as a result of that, they're not critical thinkers. So, and I have to say that's not true. I mean, if you just pause more, the way that we've been taught, what is the value of facts and knowledge has a particular set of values, and we need to learn that. And we need to respect the elder because they have trod their paths and they're advanced ahead of us. Therefore, we respect them. We don't confront them right away because there's a understanding of, hey, he's done a lot of hard work and he's taken him a long time to get there. But it doesn't mean that we don't question the source of the knowledge and, not oftentimes it's not at faith, not right there, right then, but certainly maybe in a different environment where those hierarchies are sort of put aside momentarily. There are really important and great questions that I find Asian students are willing to ask of their professor, of their teachers. But you have to deconstruct, you have to, as an educator, you have to go out of your way to create that safe space where they know that by them questioning you about your knowledge, they are not disrespecting you or undermining you. And we have to appreciate that. It's in a way that's almost like inclusivity in a sense again. It's trying to make sure that everyone has a space for themselves, right? And we don't encroach upon that and undermine someone else's space. And I guess this is the concept of face in Asian cultures. It's trying to save face for each other. And I think that's really important. And I guess where the other side is that I'm coming, when I encountered this question, and I thought to myself, what are the things that I encounter on a daily basis, or that this happens? Well, this has to be it. And I don't really know whether there's a great solution for anyone, but I think if you can have the courage, whoever you are out there, that doesn't matter where you come from, right? If you can just have a little bit of courage and be prepared that, as so many of our panelists have mentioned, that sometimes when you put yourself out there, it can be quite dangerous and they'll lash out. There'll be people that ask questions, make fun of your food. My daughter's going through all that right now and I really feel for her. And it reminds me that, maybe our world hasn't come much of a long way since I was a kid. So, but you have to constantly be ready for that experience. And as long as you don't allow those experiences, negative experiences, consume you, and you realize that they come from a place of not understanding and not knowing, fear, perhaps, then you can put that aside because you can't control what other people do. But what you as an individual represent in your culture, what you can do in fighting those mythicisms and misconceptions, that you can change people's conception. You can demonstrate that, hey, I am capable of critical thinking, and hey, I don't want to be taken advantage of simply because I'm hardworking as a cultural value. And you need to be ready and stand up to that. And sometimes there are repercussions, but I think, as my mom has once told me, when we come to Canada, you are going to represent your culture, whether you like it or not. And people are going to judge you by your actions. And because, oh, look at that Chinese person, look at the way they drive. Yes, there's an enormous amount of pressure, but I embrace the pressure because I also say I don't want them to think that way of my people. And that I also represent my cultural values, and I can be a force of good and influence to you if you're willing to come and understand me as I'm opening my door to let you in as well. So that's a little story for me.
I definitely resonated with both of your stories once again. I had a point here, oh my goodness, it just completely left. I guess I'll just dive right in. Oh yes, the hardworking. So coming to Canada as an immigrant and as a Pakistani, definitely my parents really valued education and being hardworking. So that is one thing that they really ingrained into us, that you must get an education, you must have post-secondary. If you do masters, oh my god, amazing. If you get a doctoral, holy, you made it. Like, you know, education to them is you made it. And also establishing yourself into the world, and it kind of goes back to, you know, like you really just made it and you've integrated yourself into the culture that this new culture that you're trying to navigate, and being in Canada. So it just feels like you really have to prove, it feels like that the message that I was getting is that you really have to work hard to prove that you are able to fit into the society and that you belong here. Yeah. So that was really hard for me, just kind of understanding and figuring out a pathway for myself that, you know, like I love and that I'm comfortable with. My dad had never really accepted psychology as a degree that is of any value. He said, well, why would you do that? That's, you know, like what's the purpose of psychology? You should go into business. Business is everything, like in his business mindset and stuff. So yeah, so I kind of experienced that as like one of those misconceptions and everything. But also another one ties really into with religion. Pakistan is a dominantly Islamic state, and within that comes like a lot of religious misconceptions as well. So growing up, I definitely heard, oh my god, are you a terrorist? Right to my face, and I'm just like, oh my god, what even is that? You know, I'm so young, I don't know what that means. So learning about that and learning like, oh my, you think I'm a threat? Like, so that was, yeah, so just growing up, just hearing all these misconceptions around religion, Islam, it's heartbreaking because everybody has the means, there's Google, come on, search it up. Like, educate yourselves. And that's what really frustrates me about cultural misconceptions, is that we all have the ability to educate ourselves and we don't take those extra steps to learn about different cultures or integrate it within our lives or accept people for who they are and just see them as humans, not their skin color or the misconceptions that brings. So in particular with cultural religious misconceptions is an example that in my first year of university, it was my first year, I was in this political studies course, and we were talking about the burqa ban at that time that was happening within, I think it was Ottawa or Ontario. Yeah. So we were talking about that and discussing that for the burqa ban, and a white man from the United States, of course, raised his hand and was a bit ignorant and said, "They're all oppressed." And I was livid. In the back of the class, oh, I would never speak. I raised my hand and I said, "Turn around and look at me. Am I oppressed?" And the whole class was just stunned, shocked. And I, I stood up for my religion, my culture, and I told, no, that's a misconception, it's not true. So that is one misconception that really comes to mind while I was thinking about this question, and it still pertains to today. I don't, the media also frames things in a way that, really targets minorities and says they're wrong, and how we don't really know the state, how the United States has really played a part in all the conflicts that happen back home and everything like that. So yeah, please just educate yourselves, because we all have the means to. Don't be ignorant.
Thank you so much. I think one of the things that I really want to, echo what you said is that the media is one of those systems that really proliferate misconceptions, and it definitely becomes it's not just news, but it becomes one of those things that is inbuilt within the system, within person's mind, ingrained in their attitudes towards immigrants. And one of the misconceptions that they have about Jamaicans is that we are aggressive. People think that Jamaicans are very aggressive because of one of the things is that about Jamaicans, when we talk, we gesticulate a lot. And the other thing is that sometimes we may have a very high flow pitch. And that is just how we express ourselves. And we are not aggressive. And the other thing, as you mentioned, is that we don't tend to be passive people. If we feel as if we're undermined, if we feel as if we're being devalued, we are going to tell you straight to your face. We are, we shoot straight, and people don't like that. We tell you to your face, and people don't like that, and then they think that Jamaicans are aggressive, but we are very passionate about what we do, and we also have very high standards for the things that we do. And people misconstrue that in the wrong way to say that these people are actually aggressive. But no, it's not aggressive, it's just who we are, and that if we find that people are discounting us or devaluing us, we will speak up. The other thing that misconception that people have about Jamaicans, and this goes back to the media, is that we all smoke ganja, and that's a lie. Right, that's another misconception. I remember when I was in Usask, I was working once, not at this, when I just came as a student. I was asked, "Do you smoke weed?" And I'm like, "No, my mom would kill me if I smoked weed." Right? She would actually kill me. I wouldn't live to see today. As a matter of fact, I don't even know what the weed looks like, because it is not something that was tolerated in my house. As a matter of fact, it's illegal. If you're found with a large quantity on your person, you can go to jail. So not everyone in Jamaica smokes weed every day and get high, and we have nothing to do. So those are some of the misconceptions, that we're aggressive people, that we smoke every day. Not all Jamaicans smoke. As a matter of fact, when the tourists comes to Jamaica, they're the ones that smoke.
Thank you. So now we come to our last question for our panelist. Have you ever experienced culture shock and/or reverse culture shock? How did you adjust to them, and how did it affect your perspective?
Ooh, okay. This requires a little bit of background. So I was born in Nigeria. I was born in a village in Oju State. But at 5, we moved to Kuwait and stayed there until I was 8 years old. Then moved back to Nigeria, stayed until 11, and then moved to Canada. So all of my life, I've been moving back and forth, back and forth. And when we came to Kuwait, as a child, I had a vivid, I was a child that had consciousness very, very early on. So at 5, I still remember all of the things that we would see around. And one of the things that we did is that whenever we visit a house, that is Yoruba people, whenever we visit a house, we always bring oil and rice as a housewarming gift. Except it's every single day. If you don't bring rice or oil, you bring something cooked. It's just to show that thank you for letting me into this house. Here's something that I am making or giving to you. So I remember in Kuwait when we first came there, and we lived in a hotel apartment, and this was years ago. But the government in Kuwait did not actually want foreigners in Kuwait, because of it would disrupt the tourism section. They didn't really want to see Africans. So we lived in the outskirts. There was a hotel apartment that they would put all the immigrants in. And I remember that we didn't have enough money to be staying in the hotel and the apartment. So my mom would pay the hotel manager with oil and rice. And that's how we lived for the 3 years that we stayed in Kuwait. We would buy oil and rice and give it, and they loved it. They absolutely loved it. When I came to Nigeria, this was now a reverse cultural shock for me, because to show respect to elders, we would bow down. And I hated that. I hated that as a kid. I was like, I'm not going to bow down to anyone. Who do you think you are? The only person I bow down to is the Lord God Almighty. And for so long, my teachers, the principals, they would yell at my mom saying that, why isn't this person bowing down? They show no respect at all. Now, when I come to Canada, I actually find joy in bowing down to the elders. I find joy in it. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I miss it. I miss that homesickness feeling, that community, that reverence. Where in Nigeria, I hated every moment that I had to kneel down on the dirt floor. Now, I'm in Superstore. And I see another Nigerian, and I just quickly bow down. And the way that their face lights up, because of kids in Canada that have been grown up in Canada, they don't do that. But then here comes this person, this stranger, that comes and kneels down to me like I did something great. And you can see that face light up. So in a way, I got over it by focusing on how the elders feel rather than how I feel about it. So that was a lovely little culture shock, reverse culture shock that really got in there. There are some elders that are really mean to everyone that I still don't bow down to. I don't even touch that. I just give them a quick bow and run off. But yeah, that's just a little story.
Wow, thanks for sharing that piece. Yeah. So one of the things as I'm listening to all these stories and everyone sharing their experiences is I realize that we, as immigrants who move to a different culture, that we often struggle with this public and personal identity. It's almost like we have split ourselves into much more than a person who just never went to a different community or a different place, right? And and I find every time you go to a new location, like you, I've also traveled quite a bit, and after I've grown up as well. So after I finished uni, I went to Malaysia, and which was a really interesting experience because that was my first exposure to what Islamic religion, but it wasn't purely Islamic. It was like a tripartite of Buddhism and what was that other one? There's also an Indian community there, so they also had their own religion, and somehow I don't think they integrated. In my mind, I was like, here's a society with 3 religions, 3 different major cultures, and I don't think there's inclusion in integration. It's 3 separate entities, and with the dominant one operating over everything. But after I grew up, that was my first cultural shock. I'll tell you something. I do not recommend doing this. I went there with my wife. We had a competition to see who would find a job first, and anonymous is not very easily employable. So she was a Chinese teacher, and she landed a job at international school. And so I was like, well, at least we got a job and we're going to be able to save up money, so let's go. And then I was like, it's Asia? How different could it be? So wrong. Didn't do any research. So went in there, and I remember the first morning when the Azan call got made. And it was on over the speaker, and I didn't realize that it was how many times a day. I was warned that there were going to be calls, but I had not realized it was over the megaphone. I had this picturesque image of the Azan standing in the mosque and then doing the call as the sun is rising. No, this was a loudspeaker that was pointed at your window, and we were just about 200 meters away from the mosque, so I could see the speaker. So it was a straight line to the speaker, and it got to a point I sort of said, I wonder if they could turn that down a little bit, or you just switch the direction, because I can't change the window on my apartment. But I said, I'm going to be an open mind. I want to understand this, because I didn't have a computer at the time. I couldn't Google anything. I'll go ask the Azan, and I was approached him very politely. I went, and I said, I don't want to offend, and I actually respect all your religious practice, but can you help me understand why the call? Is there a directionality? Because I see in my exposure to National Geographic, they had to call in a direction. So, but their direction was all around. So, but I just wanted to understand more. I said, I was met with a lot of aggression right away. It was, even though I said, look, I don't want to offend, and you can tell me if I'm going beyond. He told me to get out of the country. In fact, he even knew how to swear. So he used the F word with me, and get out of my effing country and go back to where he came from. And I was like, well, so here's a religious leader, head of the mosque, someone I was approaching respectfully as I can, and I was like, you don't have to change anything. I don't want you to change anything. I just want to understand, so that in the future, wherever I go, I can inform others that, hey, be heads up, they're doing this because of this. So don't, just respect them. So, but that's not what I meant. Instead, I got met with aggression. I think he was ready to beat me up and wanted to kill me.
Oh my God.
He was really aggressive, and but I never held it against him. I think that's really important. We have negative experiences with, it could be Chinese, it could be anyone. And just like you said, in the media, we get portrayed as if that cultural identity is what mattered. But at the end of the day, that probably most likely doesn't matter at all. That was an individual's action, period. And I don't understand why we need to extend that and extrapolate that. Because I think we all love to do it, and our brain, coming from a neuroscience perspective, that's what we want to do. Our brain's a predictive negative learning machine. We want to take all the negative experiences and say, oh, that's probably not good for my survival. And so I don't want that to happen. And that's how we learn. We memorize and remember those experiences, and we attach it to something we can readily identify. And what's the easiest? Your skin color, your dress, the type of people. And so that's one cultural shock experience that I had. And the reverse cultural shock was, I guess, going to Australia and coming back to Canada. So interestingly, I was going to Australia, English Commonwealth country. I was like, oh yeah, this is going to be all right. And always heard good things about Australians being nice and easygoing. This will be good. And I landed there, and the first thing I heard, oh, they're putting all these international refugees on an island and locking them up. Like, what? so that was my first exposure to Australia in 2010 too. Yeah, so, and that was one of the first policies that was in 2010 to 2012 that started happening. And I remember looking on, I said, is this real? How can a Commonwealth country, a country made up of, well, migrated people, sure they might have been there for 400 or 500 years, but how could they not recognize that they were also migrants? But yeah, that was quite shocking to me. And as I watched this political situation unfold, and I'll share one more story about reverse cultural shock. So I grew up in Ottawa, having mostly white friends, and then my first experience in Toronto was shocking. This was at a university. I remember walking to a bubble tea shop for the first time in like 10 years, and then there I looked open, turned my eyes, and it was all Asian. And I said to my friend, "Oh my goodness, we all look the same," because I haven't seen that number of Asian people collectively in that number, and all wearing glasses. I was like, oh, we do all look alike. I all of a sudden, I think that these experiences, I think, help me empathize, right? When the other people come and they don't understand, they say, oh, you Asians, blah, blah, blah. You can insert your favorite misconception. And you have space for them. Because of my experience that I have lived through, and identify my own unconscious bias and those experiences, I realize they're just wherever they're at. And if I can be a slight mover in that, a little catalyst that helps share a little bit of my experience and gives them that space, maybe we have better inclusivity and they won't have that misunderstanding about who we are and what we do. So treasure those experiences.
Oh, I love that point thank you for that, both of you. Oh my goodness, such great speakers. That's a great point as well, just to see people as individuals and individual experiences rather as a collective. That is such a huge mistake, I think, that we make. So yeah, I really agree with that. For me, it's quite interesting because since I came here when I was 4 years old, so it's been quite a long time where I've been living in Saskatoon myself, and I've never went back. So I don't really have that reverse cultural shock or that cultural shock because I was very, very young and I didn't really know what was going on. So I genuinely don't remember majority of my childhood. I know, yeah, so that was different too, but majority, like, I just don't remember being into, like, I've had those experiences as a kid where, it hurt, but I don't remember a huge, shock to what's happening. But it's interesting growing up to, I find, I'm kind of outing myself over here, but I find that I live a life like Hannah Montana. Because, it's sometimes the way that I perceive the way that I walk into our cultural events versus the way that I will walk into life separately outside of culture is quite different. Although I'm still my unique, genuine self, I tend to protect some aspects of myself and my life just to protect that cultural barrier and not to get just kind of, there are still strong conservative ideologies that culture holds, and I just find that to protect myself, I don't really like to expose that to very many people inside of my culture, but outside I'm very authentic and genuine and kind of just say who I am, but within it, it's kind of interesting. So I kind of experience that when I'm walking into a cultural event, or even I find sometimes at home, it's always this double life, I guess, and that's what I kind of just struggle with, is accepting that balance. And I'm only 22, so I'm trying to figure out my life still. I don't know it all again, so just kind of accepting that. But I think that's where the shock kind of comes in, and just knowing that there are barriers that prevent me from fully being myself, even in family or even in my cultural community and stuff. So it's unfortunate, but it's reality.
I like listening to the stories. Thank you guys for sharing. Culture shock for me. When I came to Canada, one of the things that I was shocked, because in Jamaica, as Jamaicans, we are very sociable people. We could be on the bus, I don't know you, you don't know me, but we are on the bus or we're taking a taxi and we strike up a conversation. And that conversation could be like from traveling for an hour, people are talking on the bus and they're just talking because that's who we are. You're walking, you don't know anyone, and you meet someone, you go to maybe the bank and you're waiting, a conversation starts. So when I came here as a student and I took the bus, I realized that everyone minded their own business. No one talked to anyone. I'm like, this is so different from back home where we are conversing and you're laughing, you're talking, but it's like everyone has tunnel vision here. You are going about your business and no one cares about the other one. I don't know if it's good or bad, but living here, after a while, I tend to, on the bus, I mind my own business. I'm not looking around at anyone. I'm just going straight. So that's one shocker that I got. The other thing was that Saskatoon was strangely quiet. I don't know if it's a shock or something, but it is just strangely quiet in comparison to where I'm coming from, because on the weekends, Thursdays, Fridays, sometimes on Sundays, because Sunday is considered a very holy day when people go to church, but now it has changed, where people would be having parties and dances, and you have the boom boxes, and I mean, it could be a mile away, but you're hearing it. And like on Saturdays, especially on Fridays and Saturdays, and people are not going to, we call them dance, they're not going to the dance until maybe 12 o'clock in the night. But the music starts from around 3 o'clock. And you would hear the music. And back home, I would be so tired of the music. I'm tired of the noise. But I came to Saskatoon and it was gravely quiet. And I remember distinctly one day, I sat in my house and I'm like, I would do anything just to hear music, just to hear some sound. It was just gravely quiet. And that was a shock. I don't know if you would call it a shock, but it was something that was just outside the norm. In terms of reverse culture shock, I've only been back home once. And I don't know if I could really say that it's reverse culture shock, because I left Jamaica I know my culture, it's ingrained in me. But there was just one thing, because you're here and you get used to the efficiency of things. I went back home and I had business to do, and I went to the bank and I was so aggravated at how long I had to wait. I'm like, no, this can't happen. And I was just very, very irritated at the fact that I had to wait a day to do something, and I was like, if I was in Saskatoon, this wouldn't have taken me very long. But apart from that, I don't really have any, in terms of reverse racism, because I've only been back once, and it wasn't for a very long time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I actually have a really funny story about sort of reverse culture shock. I used to live in Regina, and every time I go back to China, I have to go through Vancouver here, because there isn't a direct flight from Regina to Beijing. And then on one particular year, I haven't been home for 2 years, and the flight from Regina to Vancouver broke down, so I actually had to fly from Regina to Edmonton, Edmonton to Calgary, and then Calgary to Vancouver, and then Vancouver to Beijing. So after 24, 25 hours of traveling, I arrived at the Beijing airport and I was like, oh my goodness, there's so many people. So I was going through custom and I was so tired. And the lady who was helping me through custom was really kind. So I thought to myself, okay, Ella, you gotta be really polite to her. And because here, usually when someone helps us with something, we say thank you and then we say like, have a good day. And I remember thinking to myself, you have exactly 2 seconds to translate that sentence into Mandarin. And here's what I came up with. 祝你有个好的天. And for those of you in the audience who doesn't speak Mandarin, it is probably the most awkward sentence you'll ever hear in your life. And I just remember thinking to myself, okay, like she's looking at me really weird, like what did I just say there? And I thought back to my sentence, oh, yeah, no, probably not. Yes, anyway, so now we're here, we arrive at our Q&A session. Does anyone in the audience have any questions for our panelists?
So it was really nice coming here, and as I was expecting, I learned a lot of new things, but what I wasn't expecting and found out happening is that I learned something about myself, which is, I wasn't expecting that. That was weird. So basically, I came to Canada in 2017, 5 years ago, and before that I lived in the United Arab Emirates for like 10 years. But originally, my background is that I am Palestinian, and for maybe some of the audience who know about Palestine, for example, on my permanent residence card, it says that my nationality is stateless because it's not identified. So I realized in this panel that because I have been in so many places, I lived in the Middle East, I lived here, I even lived in Europe for a bit. I have a problem with, I noticed that I have a problem with finding what culture that I'm mostly connecting with. I don't connect with many people who have been living here for a long time, or people who live back where I'm from, or the places I have been to. So what do you think about that? If someone haven't had the small transition and had like many experiences of travel and going around, or not having a country to really call their own, what do you think of that?
Okay, we're looking at me.
You have a mic.